Well, you may be waiting for the Grey report where we have Channing, Krishnamurty and Kedjanyi report. It is the polling station. We've had another dramatic week. Boris is still at the helm. He had what was described by Guto Harry yesterday as a display of the alpha male gorilla in the jungle in Parliament. William, what were your thoughts on that?
I thought that was what he tried to do. Whether it was successful or as successful as Guto Harry seemed to suggest it was, I'm not really sure. I think he's got a group of Tory MPs on side. I think they are about 100 strong, probably a few more who are wavering and don't really want to make a push yet. But it's all subject to change.
Yeah, so apparently he has been talking to those of the wavering class, as they might call them in North Korea, about what their hopes are for the future in terms of Boris or not. Got to start with you, William. What are the political betting moves since we were talked here a week ago?
Okay, so the first thing to note is that we have seen twofold. Number one, a move or some moves in the market for Johnson's exit date. It had drifted out. It then contracted quite a bit when the report seemed imminent. And we have to remember, we've had 3 days rumoured that the report was going to drop. It was supposed to drop Wednesday. It was supposed to have a state before PMQs. That stretched. Then the idea was it could come today. Now we've settled, I think, on it supposedly being next Monday. And in that, I think we've seen Johnson. He did touch freeze on to go this year, and then he drifted out. Actually, he drifted out a bit with us. I remember there being a bit of twos on. He's now 5-2 on to leave office this year. We also have his leave office month market, and yesterday he touched 4-6 to be gone by the 30th of June. That's now 5-6. So we did see a contraction yesterday afternoon, but I think the market's called until we see that report. Also, just worth looking at the next prime minister, or sorry, the next Tory leader market, I should say, although they're mirroring each other pretty closely. Rishi Sunak now 6-5, now dominant in the market. He's very much been, I think, the best backed, and I think he's very much been the most tipped for obvious reasons. Liz Truss now 5-1 in that next Tory leader market, which is a price I think people have told you was big 2 or 3 weeks ago, but the polling is suggesting Sunak for now.
Yeah, Neil, you thought the two of them coupled last week was, you're getting a little bit under even money was value.
Yeah, I did, and I noticed she's slightly tightened up a little bit in the market, but on the exchange market, Rishi Sunak's he's been relatively weak. I did see the other day he was referring to the rise in national insurance to be Boris's rise in national insurance. Oh, that's a bit of a cheek, isn't it? You're the Chancellor, mate. If you didn't really want to raise national insurance, perhaps you shouldn't have put it in your budget. But maybe that's showing that he's trying to distance himself. Lots of people seem to be talking about getting rid of Johnson before the conference, so that they can. Well, they traditionally have a leadership campaign in the summer, don't they? If they're going to get rid of somebody, and then then they come to conference with the new leader. But you've got to question whether anybody. Do you want to take over right now? I guess if you're Rishi Sunak and you're taking over, you don't need such a run-in before the election because you're quite relatively speaking, most MPs are not very recognisable by the general public. If you show random people in the street pictures of MPs and they're not the party leaders or the massive front bench jobs, they just have no idea who they're looking at. I guess with Rishi Sunak, they'd probably have a bit of an idea. And so he probably doesn't need such a big run into the next general election. Where if you're someone like, I don't know, say Tom Tugendhat, you're going to need a bit of time to, tell people who you are and what you're about. So you probably want to get rid of Johnson a bit quicker.
Paul, you're in Greece, which is a little bit closer to what's going on the Russian-Ukraine border, where Russia have amassed, I think, 100,000 troops or something like that. All this has happened in the background. It's something of a bizarre distraction for Johnson, but it's actually the whole mess in the Tory party is happening at an extremely important time in European politics.
It's very important, and I think that might play a part in it because if war broke out, that is a very, very difficult time to start dumping your prime minister, right? And you know, I've gone a little bit cold on it this week. He's not resigning. You know, he's going to tough this out, and his supporters are going to tough this out. And, you know, maybe there is a point where their supporters, regardless of the majority of public opinion, just take his side, get fed up with it. It's very Trumpian. We saw that that works, right? And people are, and we can pore over the facts of the Sue Gray report or this business with the animals in Afghanistan. We can pore over all these many lies. But I've always thought that the conditions of political and public life in America are very similar to here. And we saw that for years in America, that ultimately you get this kind of cult right-wing leader, and they can lie all the time. They can lie 24/7
with total impunity.
Sorry, go on. Just to pick up on that, the market on whether he goes this year, it was basically when they found out about the suitcase full of wine. That was the absolute shortest price he's been to go this year. I think people, for some reason, that seemed to be so flagrant. And I think on the exchanges, the price hit like 1.27 at that stage. It's back closer to 1.5 now. You know, perhaps people just, after a while, I think people just think another party, like what difference does that make? It's just one extra party. You know, I think people that got quite excited about the Colin the Caterpillar cake and all that, I didn't really think that was going to make a big difference. He's definitely not resigning, is he? He's going to have to, you know, it's down to the Tory backbenchers. There was a Survation poll out earlier today, just the standard, you know, if there was a general election tomorrow question. Tories were up 2, Labour were down 2. The working for that was done 2 days ago, 40 against 34. So it's only a 6-point lead. You know, this was done 2 days ago.
Pretty much like the position, though, doesn't it? I think that is where we are, roughly, among polls. If you take out the don't knows, you know, and you take out the extreme effects of the news, so that is roughly where we are. But that's catastrophic in the local election, and I think that's the next trigger point. If he isn't removed in the next week or so, I don't think they are going to remove it before the locals.
Yeah,
but I think they're going to get obliterated.
Right. Elaborate.
Well, I think that as we saw in the by-election in Shropshire, as we've seen in a number of elections now, and you see in the general spread of the polls and the vote, the majority of people now support progressive or non-Tory or anti-Tory parties. And I think that their own supporters, most of them will be quite happy to abstain or give them a midterm bloody nose at those local elections. And I think it'll be just a catastrophic night. The Greens will get loads of votes, the Lib Dems will get loads of votes, Labour will win all their targets. And it will be I think it will be very hard at that moment for Boris Johnson to survive. And that really would suit the original timetable, wouldn't it? Right, where they get rid of him in May and then they have the summer leadership contest. But I don't think it's good for Rishi Sunak. I think the longer you go on, the worse for Rishi Sunak.
Just the other day as well, Liz Truss said she spoke about the Ukraine and Russia. Does he use this, William, as some sort of leverage with the British people in terms of trying to bolster his popularity? We saw when he actually got COVID a couple of years ago, bizarrely, that people actually, I think it was his highest approval rating since he became PM. What happens in the Ukraine-Russia situation from a British perspective?
I think he uses it as leverage over the Tory party with the very simple case of now is not a time to change leaders, not when there's a war on. Or big invasion, something which really you could do without changing, even though I'm absolutely at pains to make the point. I think Britain has changed leaders during 3 wars, both First and Second World War, and also I think Thatcher went out when we were doing stuff in the Gulf, and I think
we were. That's right.
Yeah. So it's not as if it hasn't happened before, but yes, generally speaking, Team Boris, the argument is this is about to be a really serious moment. We have the cost of living crisis. Do we really need to essentially bring government to a stop and have all this sort of farrago whilst there are issues of grave importance? Although I think it's worth counterpointing that with the fact that people who are working in government on policy are already saying nothing is getting done. This is not really a government with a great track record. But
it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? That like 160,000 people have died of COVID.
Yeah.
And now they're saying, oh, we can't possibly get rid of this excellent prime minister who seems to have spent the whole time having a party because, we're in serious times suddenly because, there might be a war that we don't really need to be, too interested in. But I don't know. Like, I noticed most of the people that are talking up the war have direct connections to armed companies.
I mean, not just that also, but the guy has to be the worst foreign secretary I can possibly remember. He's not as if he's got a great track record in that area. But it is something I think that those on the Save Boris team, let's say it's about 100 MPs, will be really heavily sort of pressuring other Tory MPs with. And there is a possibility that it might delay things and it might just kick this can down the road. But it's not zero sum for the Tory party, because the longer this goes on, the longer the Boris-Tory brand association grows closer, and it becomes very difficult to untangle, much like you have.
Very quickly on that point, I just, because I did have a bit of a look at this Survation poll, there's quite a big gap between, there's only 6 points between Labour and the Tories in the outright question, which is kind of daft really, because it's what would happen, who would you vote if there was a general election tomorrow? But then when you ask them who's a better prime minister out of Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson, it's a much bigger gap, and they much prefer Keir Starmer. So it's almost like people answering that question, the main question, were answering it as if to sort of say, well, I like the Tory party. Well, I don't like it as much as Labour, but only by 6 points. But I don't like Boris Johnson than Keir Starmer. So his personal rating has really gone down. Although, obviously they were being asked if there's a general election tomorrow, which would mean voting for Boris Johnson. So it's a kind of a bit weird. But definitely his brand is tarnished more than the Tory brand, I think.
When you look at those best prime minister polls, the figures on both sides are very, very low. We're talking about 34-26. We're talking about the hardcore base of both parties.
Sure.
Yes, therefore I support that person, right? And that should suggest that there is an enormous amount of volatility in this. There is not. People are not that fixed to parties.
Well, also, I mean, we've seen that a lot of Tory voters have switched to don't know at the moment. So, it probably will depend quite a lot on who replaces him and, whether people like the cut of their jib. But of course, the media are going to get behind whoever replaces him. And Rishi Sunak was ridiculously popular at the time of the furlough scheme. He's been less popular when he was when he was deciding to make tax rises on working people in the budget. But he saved some fiscal headway, which he could have spent in the budget. He put tax rises on working people. He's obviously done all that to keep some up his sleeve so that they can have a big tax cutting budget just before the election.
I'm sceptical that they can pull any of that off, though. I mean, I think that
that is their playbook, isn't it? That's the Linton Crosby playbook.
Yeah, but the real world sometimes catches up on you, right? And in the end, if people on fixed incomes, their things are going up. Yeah, you've also got all of the Brexit fallout. It's just a catastrophe. Massive delays at Dover every day.
And it's barely spoken about, Paul. This is it's so mad.
The whole subject, all these subjects we're talking about, we're living in a country which the media political nexus is a joke. All sorts of subjects are just not discussed, right? All sorts of ridiculous talking points are pushed forward. And I think, to be perfectly honest with you, I mean, even with this Boris Johnson stuff and the parties and the cake, that triggers all sorts of emotions in people. People don't trust the media. A lot of people can see, probably on all sides of this debate, that there's a really obvious orchestrated coup taking place, right? Where somebody keeps leaking really obvious stuff to the media every day. Who is that person? We all have our theories. I know I think it, but I know I think it's for. But that is the state of play in this country. And, Brexit is just being ignored, but ultimately people's living standards are struggling. the public finances are in a mess. There are queues at Dover every day. There are shortages in the shops, and it's only going to get worse.
William,
wait till you hear about climate change. You're going to be in for a real shock.
This is the thing, and I don't. He's so many. There are so many things for Boris Johnson to be worried about at the moment, William. That where does it go? And is he actually in a better position than when we spoke last week? As Neil alluded there, he's kind of gone slightly out in the betting in terms of an imminent departure.
Yes, but I think that's a very, and I'm sure Neil did allude to this in his analysis, that's a very temporary thing, right? Because we are literally in a grey area. We are just waiting for the Sugray report. And I think
we knew what you were doing with the grey area, by the
way. Some of my best comic work. But I think next week probably is, as Paul alluded to earlier, I think it's probably the big week, right? Because I'd be really surprised if it hadn't been released by then. And I think the longer it does go unreleased, by the way, the more that begins to become a problem. Because people,
does it make or break him, the Grey report, effectively?
I've flip-flopped on this. I initially thought yes, then I thought because of the way some people were suggesting it might be published, it wouldn't be the thing that does him in. But now I do think it's probably the biggest factor. It's probably the biggest obstacle in the road for him to navigate, just because they've put their eggs in that basket. The replies have been from Johnson and from many other ministers, let's wait for the report, let's wait for the inquiry, let's wait for Sugray. The longer, by the way, that they have to do this, it's also a problem because the public already has their doubts at some level about the report. We've seen this in polling, specific polling on the issue. The longer it goes, particularly if people are expecting a full publication and they don't get it, the more a problem that becomes for him as well. I think he is in largely the same place he was. I think he does have more party support. I think there's been a rally around the flag effect, namely because of Christian Wakeford, which I think brought quite a few to their senses. Sorry, like a follow the leader effect. There was a bit more support for him on the backbenches, I think, since then. But it's still very fraught. And long term, and this is a bigger issue down the road, what's the sort of positive aspect of having Boris Johnson as Prime Minister for the Tory party? Like there has been one, I think, for various reasons beforehand. I don't see where that sort of sunny, boosterish Johnson comes from again.
Did he show any signs of that yesterday in PM questions?
He tried to, and he was definitely more up for it. But I think it was more an act of self-preservation. And I think there is that issue long term, again, of is he an electoral asset? The polling position might reverse and the parties might become a bit closer again, and that could ease the pressure off as well. But I'm not sure if that's a great position for the Tory party.
If I say this to you, Paul, right, I'm Irish, but like if I look at the Prime Minister of the UK, I literally cannot believe a single word that he says. We are at that point. What does he have to offer as a UK PM going forward?
Well, if you're looking outside the country, nothing. I'm in Greece at the moment. Right, people are laughing about this. People are watching PMQs in Greece, and they are laughing. I was speaking to my friend who's on holiday in Tenerife the other day, and she said it was just people around the pool watching British politics on their phone and laughing, and what a ridiculous country. You know, we are turning ourselves into a joke. And to just follow the conversation, try and explain to an outsider the cake thing, right? and being ambushed by a cake. You know, it's crazy. It's properly crazy. Like, it's very, very Trumpian. The whole situation is, you know, very much like that. But, you know, as I say, like the British media, political world is a very weird place. And I think another thing we have to consider here is the electorate involved here, which is Conservative Party members and supporters. And firstly, we don't really know truly what the composition of the Conservative Party membership is nowadays, because it's changed a lot since Brexit, a lot. You know, all of those far right parties have all collapsed. This is another thing that's just never talked about, right? You know, that was the real story. If you look at the local elections last year, they ended up 36% on projected national vote share, the Tories. But this was in a world where you had no Brexit party, no UKIP, English Democrats, BNP, right? parties that always took a considerable section of local elections. And I think a lot of those people, a lot of the activists from those parties have joined the Tories. You hear people talking about the realignment, in that they kind of see the Tories doing what the Republicans are doing in America. I'm not sure that really works very well here. And so, and amongst those people, I would imagine Boris Johnson remains pretty popular. And also, I mean, just an aside, did you see Ben from Ipsos Mori wrote a piece last week in which he explained why he doesn't think Sunak will win?
I didn't see that, no.
Very interesting. And he's saying, like, look where his support, he was saying, like, sort of one, I think it's shallow, his support. But secondly, look where his support comes from. Look at the regions. It's from places where there are.
Are you saying, was he talking about within the parliamentary party to get into the last two, or within the membership to win?
Yeah, no, he was talking about both, I think, and generally the sort of the fragility of Sunak's position as a frontrunner.
Because I think, people said that Boris Johnson wouldn't get into the last two because he's not clubbable enough, to use that horrible expression they sometimes use in the Tory party. They said he doesn't hang around the tea room enough. He hasn't got enough mates in Parliament to get the nominations. And then for one reason or another, suddenly they all fell behind him.
There was one reason. It happened overnight.
Yeah, well, whatever. My point is, my point is that, Sunak's exactly the same. He's not, he doesn't drink. He doesn't hang around in Parliament. He's not going in to speak in all kinds of, debates. He hasn't been an MP, that many years. He's really in the same boat. But at the end of the day, what we do know is that Tory backbenchers, they just want a winner that's going to keep them their job, basically. And they're going to pick a leader that they think is going to win a general election for them.
While you're there,
they might also, in that situation, look, as I say, that Sunak's popularity is possibly very fragile based on the furlough scheme. It's not particularly important in the places they need to win, in the constituencies they need to win. And they might well look at I think Penny Morton is a very interesting candidate. I really do. I've always thought Penny Morton was very electable. She was in America talking about turning Brexit into some war with the European Union recently, which was exactly the message those people want to hear. And they might look at someone, very much like Cameron. When Cameron became leader, he was unknown, he was the outsider, he did one speech, and then Newsnight did a focus group, and the focus group loved Cameron. And that was it. That was the race done.
But when you talk about the Tory membership, I mean, they've always been to the right of the parliamentary party, generally speaking. But of course, the parliamentary party has moved massively to the right since Johnson's been there, because he turfed out all the sorts of Dominic Greaves and David Gawkes and Churchill's grandson and all that kind of lot. So it doesn't really matter now. It's like they haven't really changed the Tory membership relative. They've changed relatively to the PLP, to the parliamentary party. I said the PLP there. I'm so used to talking about bloody Labour, but they are essentially the same. There's 120,000 of them. They're quite old. They're generally male. They're generally white. They're generally anti-Europe. They're generally quite anti-progressive, and pretty much they could vote for any of these people, couldn't they? Really?
Did their membership not go up? I thought their
it did. They were talking about it being 100, and then some people said it was 140 after the last leadership election. Well, if we call it 120, knowing that they generally exaggerate those things, I think that's
I'm just wondering who those people are, though. I'm wondering, like you say, it's changed. The sort of people.
I don't think the sort of people has really changed. I mean, they were always quite right-wing.
People who were shy Tories, who maybe supported could have liked a Rory Stewart, could have liked a Theresa May.
In my opinion, those people, they didn't join the Tory party. They just voted for them.
They've left, and they've been replaced by people who used to be members of UKIP and the BNP. And
my argument is that the membership was always that kind of person, the UKIP person, whereas the people who are just the shy Tory, the guy who, is voting for his house price or whatever in leafy Surrey, he voted Tory always, but he was never a member of the Tory party.
Laura Pidcock has, just coming in on Labour, sorry, Laura Pidcock has left the Labour Party. It was interesting in her comments.
She didn't leave the Labour Party, she just quit the NEC.
Quit the NEC, rather, and commented that Labour has basically abandoned the left under Keir Starmer. Is Britain actually a cold country for anyone with vaguely left-wing persuasions these days?
It always
has
exactly. Been. Always has been. When has there ever been a left-wing government in Britain?
We're going to have Sinn Féin are basically topping the poll in Northern Ireland comfortably, topping the poll in the south of Ireland very comfortably. Possibility of a left-wing sort of led government in the south. Probability actually of a left-wing government in the south. Possibility of Sinn Féin being the biggest party in Northern Ireland for the first time. Their left-wing credentials will be severely put to the test. But where's the Labour Party now, Neil?
Well, I mean, the left has been crushed, really. I mean, basically, Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner didn't go to this Tuesday's NEC meeting. There are, I'm trying to remember now, 39 people on the NEC, and they had a vote on whether Jeremy Corbyn should be allowed back into the parliamentary party. And I think, was it 23? I can't remember the numbers now. They lost easily anyway, and that was without Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer even being there. The left have a kind of a split in the union vote and a split in the members that represent the membership on the NEC. The NEC has been so gerrymandered over the last kind of 5 years by the right. Lots of added places on the NEC. The affiliate groups, or they generally vote right. I mean, the NEC, the whole time, one of the problems that Corbyn had his whole time was he didn't really have control of the NEC, certainly not for the first 2 years of being the leader. So when people talk about, Corbyn wasn't successful at doing this, that, or the other, quite often involving dealing with anti-Semitism, he wasn't having the ability to appoint a general secretary. So he was stuck with Ian McNichol, who wanted to embarrass him at every moment. The NEC has always been a problem for the left, but now Laura Pidcock, she basically said this is a waste of time. We try and suggest things, they just don't want to work with us. There's no negotiation. They're not interested in anything we do. It's just a waste of time. They have these monthly meetings that last 12 hours. They don't abide by the rules. This has been challenged in court. People have taken the Labour Party to court and said, you're breaking your own rules. I'm a member, I pay money, I want to sue you. And a judge recently decided that it's a private members organisation and they can basically do whatever the hell they like. So once that judgment was made, the Labour right have taken that as a signal that they can just do whatever the hell they like. They don't need to abide by their own rule book.
And William, obviously all this potential Boris Johnson remaining at the helm is good news for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, it is. Longer this goes on, better it is for him, better it is for Labour in general. It takes, I think, it takes the spotlight away from them, which in a way is probably helping them. Whilst all this is going on, there's less pressure on them to set out their own agenda, less scrutiny of Labour's sort of internal relationships, infighting or whatever. All that stuff, which I think has hindered them in the past. I mean, I do think Starmer will still need to set out his plan, his agenda. For government.
I don't think he's going to plan to do that. The interesting thing, I think, is that this whole thing about you can't say liar in Parliament. So everybody's got this clever joke now where they say a constituent of mine has called you a liar. And then if the speaker says anything, you say, oh, no, I didn't say that. It was a constituent of mine. And 3 or 4 people have done that now. But I've noticed quite a lot of Starmeroids are now kind of saying that, Boris Johnson is a liar and I'd rather be a lawyer than a liar and all this kind of thing. I think it's a bit of a brass neck when, you look at the way that Keir Starmer got elected to be leader of the Labour Party and, raise your hand if you're in favour of nationalising these industries. He was first up with his hand. And suddenly now it turns out he didn't really mean any of that. 10 pledges, 10 lies. Sorry, I went off on one on Labour. You did ask me about Labour. That's your fault, Johnny, basically. But I do think it's a bit of a damn cheek that they should be attacking. There's plenty of things you can attack Boris Johnson on, but attacking him for being a liar seems like an odd one, really.
It cuts through, though. It cuts through because all those people who aren't paying attention to politics 99% of the time, going on about being ambushed by cake, and it looks ridiculous.
Before we finish up, Paul, you mentioned 14 to 1 penny mordant. Any value in the markets? I note here that in terms of Boris Johnson leave office month, by the end of this month is 130. Sorry, by the end of next month is 130. By the 31st of March 2022, 5 to 2 to leave role as PM. By 30th of June 2022 is 5 to 6. Any value there or any value elsewhere before we wrap up?
I think that I have lost a lot of faith in this because, like I say, I think he's going to tough it out. If I was going to back the early exit, I'd go into February because it's got to happen in the next 10 days or it isn't going to happen. More likely, I think, is now after the local elections. They will get their timetable, but I think that will prove bad.
What do we think about the 60% before conference, 40% after conference market?
I like before, but it's an odds-on bet, isn't it? But
William,
I'd say if he goes, I think it will probably be before conference. I think the strategy here might be to go for one of our markets and take an early option for the leave office date, right? If it's a now or never thing, you can get like 5 to 2 or even 2s. These gone by certain dates. If you think it will happen quickly, that'd be the way to go. I'm in two minds about it because I think it's very difficult now to know what will happen with the Grey Report because they could do anything with it. And as Paul has said earlier, he's at that stage where he can just say anything and do anything, almost with sort of impunity to a point amongst the people it counts for him. So it's not an odds-on shot that we get the whole thing, is it? And also the nature of Grey's report could still be, even with all of the details within it, to make reference to what people have already seen and possibly already reacted to, and then to blame, something like a culture of drinking within Westminster or general culture amongst government or something like that. It's probable, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, every single time the Tories are on a strong wicket, if they can get it back to, if they can get away with they're all the same, these people, that's good for the Tories because older people don't care, that they come and vote anyway, and that just turns off younger people. That's a win for the Tories.
I couldn't agree more. Neil, last word with you, actually.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to ask me something specific. In terms of when he goes, I kind of feel like I haven't had a play too much on this market, and I've been sort of thinking, well, he's never resigning, and do these people feel like, I think they want to ditch as much dirt onto him and to make him carry all the baggage, and that means they don't want to get rid of him too quickly because they want to shovel it. I've noticed, Rishi Sunak, he 3 PMQs ago, he was off in North Devon, hiding away, saying he couldn't get any mobile reception. Now he's calling it, Boris's national insurance increase. He just he's gonna want to distance himself as much as possible, blame it all on Johnson. I don't think he minds if Johnson's there for another year, even if that costs the Tories. I mean, they might be quite encouraged by seeing they're only 6 points down with Salvation, thinking, people like Rishi Sunak thinking to themselves, well, it's not that damaging. We can soon pull that back. We need him in there so that he can wear those bad local election results.
Coming up on the polling station in the next few months, we have the French election in April. We then have the Northern Irish election in May. And William, a little bit of a peak preview here. I think we're going to be the first one to price it up.
Yeah, it's definitely on our radar to do more in Northern Ireland this year. Lots of developments going on, as you well know. And as we did say on that special, it's going to be a big year. There's lots more to come after this, including plenty of federal elections all around the world. Not only do we have not only do we have, France, but we have an Australian federal election. We've also got the midterms down to the end of the year.
Brazil.
And Brazil. Yes, Brazil with our cert to 2022, because we're all Team Luna now. So, yeah, looking forward to covering that over the next few months.
With Boris at the wheel. That was the polling station. Thanks to William, thanks to Neil. Paul is in Greece, kind of looking on from afar at what's going on in Britain, and apparently being laughed at because he's British, because of Boris being at the wheel. That was the polling station. We'll talk to you next week.
See you later, guys.
Thanks, guys.